bring our viewers up to speed with what's happening on the fifth day of the Russia-Ukraine war. The peace talks between Ukraine and Russia are underway at the Belarus border. On one hand, Ukraine has demanded an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops. Reports also suggest that Russia is keen on an agreement after the talks. However, no stopping of the fierce fighting that is going on in Ukraine, especially in the capital Kyiv. Ukrainian President Zelensky has also appealed to the European Union bloc for Ukraine's membership, but so far there are different thoughts of the EU members on this issue. So let me introduce here on the program, joining us today is Colonel DPK Pillai, who's a defense and security expert. And also joining us is Mr. Dhruv Katoch, who's a strategic affairs expert. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. I want to just, begin by asking you the fact that now we are talking about talks being underway. What exactly is being negotiated? Will Russia set the terms now to withdraw troops? Will Russia's terms, because, the terms have been set even before the war. The reason this war happened was Russia's terms were not adhered to. Now, will Ukraine fall in line? What is the entire purpose of this talks that we are seeing, Major General Dhruv Katoch?
Thank you. No, in my view, I think Russia will press Ukraine to adhere to the terms which it wants. Now, let us understand, the talks are being held now in Belarus. Yes. And this was objected to earlier by Ukraine, but ultimately they were forced to go there. So the very fact that they were forced to go and do something which they did not wish to do indicates that they are on a weaker wicket. Now, as far as Russia is concerned, the campaign which they have launched has not gone as per their plan. But the point is they have got tremendous amount of forces still available with them. And at some point of time, they can pulverize the Ukrainian cities and their population centers. Now, I don't think Russia wants to take that course. So ultimately, in my view, what Russia would be aiming at is a regime change. And they would like a regime there which is favorable to Russia. If they can achieve a regime change, I presume the war will be over very quickly thereafter, and the Russian troops will withdraw.
Yes, and it's interesting because prior to the talks, when Kremlin released a statement on what exactly would be the line of negotiation. The statement that we heard is that we wait for the talks. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told media at that time that he would not declare any negotiating position. What does that tell us, Colonel Pillai, if you can come into the conversation? What does that tell us about what is being considered by Russia? What exactly are they looking to achieve through these talks? Because clearly, when it comes to the invasion, when it comes to the hostilities, there's been no let-up. But we are told that Ukraine has put up a very stiff resistance. Colonel Pillai.
Ukraine definitely has put up a very stiff resistance. It's because a large number of mercenaries or serving personnel have actually have joined the ranks from the other allied countries. And the issue is what you're talking about first was you must really understand the whole crux of the problem is Ukraine and the expansion, eastward expansion of NATO. In 1990, when with the Soviet Union's collapse and the agreement that they had on the world, more expansion towards Greece, Estonia, Poland, and other countries, and then Ukraine was the last straw. So the moment in Crimea. The occupation of Crimea, we just took about a day's invasion without a single shot being fired. And the fact that there were separatist movements in Donbass and in the Donbass region. So, the Russians have taken it over with ease. And now the red line was reached by the Americans by pushing them towards NATO. And the Russians they decided that because it's right on their doorstep. And, it's their Baltic Sea and the Black Sea. These fleets are threatened. So this is something that is non-negotiable for the Russians. So to expect them, just because talks have been held now in Belarus, which was firstly not agreed to by the Ukrainians, and then now that they will cease fire because the world has put sanctions against Russia, a country like Russia, under a leader like Putin, it's like thinking that someone is going to back away. Western democracies have lesser appetite for long-drawn battles, whereas Russia is capable of long-drawn it's proved itself in not only Napoleonic wars, but also in the when it held out in Stalingrad, where it was, by accident they held on. And that's the Soviet spirit. That's the Soviet thing. So I don't see any reason why, we should be actually pushing the Russians into conflict. They've already told them that there are nothing more sacred about the nuclear weapons. They won't hesitate to use it. And Belarus is also going to referendum today to allow nukes to be positioned in their country. So you actually seeing the Europeans who've been preaching to the Asians and others about restraint. You've seen how easily they've actually crumbled. NATO has now activated its NATO response force. This is only upping the ante. There's no restraint being shown by each other. I think the key here is to allow Russia and Ukraine to negotiate with each other, keep NATO out of it, tell America to stop meddling in other people's affairs, and then probably you can find a solution. So yes. I think that is where...
Will there be a solution? Can there be a common ground? Major General Dhruv Katoch, do you agree? The fact that, the timing, if we look at it, Ukraine agreed to the talks, it is being said now around the same time as Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the defense chiefs to put nuclear deterrence forces on high alert. So do you find this timing interesting? Do you think that both sides, when they're sitting for talks, they are going to do so with a purpose to call off this war? Of course, the extent of human tragedy is taking tremendous proportions at the moment.
I personally feel that President Putin's, getting onto the nuclear, trying to trigger the nuclear card was a bit premature. Perhaps it would have been better, perhaps, if he hadn't done it. But let us also be clear that he did it because the Ukrainian president made a statement to that effect. So there is always a reaction and a counter-reaction. At least I'm glad that NATO has not reacted to what President Putin has said. So as of now, I don't foresee any imminent nuclear threat. But you see, getting down to the crux of the problem, Colonel Pillai has put it across so nicely as far as the background is concerned. I just want to take it one step further from there. Now, when you look at the map of Russia, they have got over 5,000 kilometers of 5 to 10,000 kilometers of coastline on the north, which they can't use because that is the Arctic Ocean. So their only availability to the warm water port throughout the year is the Black Sea. Now, for them, the Black Sea is absolutely vital. If they lose the Black Sea, they lose everything. So what do they do now? If Ukraine joins NATO, which America was trying to press them to do, and I think that was another mistake which the US made, President Joe Biden, when he gave those indications that they can take them in. Now, Russia had to act, because if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, then NATO will come to their defense. But really, what happens to the coastline? What happens to the Black Sea? And the Black Sea fleet will be constricted to a very great extent there. The Russians are not going to permit it. So that being said, I think their security interests were very firmly aligned with the fact that Ukraine had to be neutral. Now, I think that question of neutrality has gone, because the way the attack is going, I think the Rubicon has been crossed. Ultimately, I think now, if you're looking at an end state, only two end states can come. One, the Ukrainian resistance will be so strong they will defeat the Russians. That means it'll go over months. That is possible, but unlikely. The second is that the Russians, kilometers. If reports have come in from intelligence agencies that their reinforcements are coming in, and they are coming in by the thousands. So when the renewed offensive comes, I'm not sure if the Ukrainians will be able to take it. And at that point of time, I presume the surrender will come. So either way, it can play out. But I don't think what is happening is good for any part of the world.
Yes, it is not. And therefore, I want to ask you, Colonel Pillai, that India's position has been non-committal. And sometimes not taking a position is also a position. How do you see India playing a role in all of this? Is there anything that, because of course there's been abstentions in the United Nations Security Council in the emergency special session at the General Assembly today itself. India abstained from the procedural vote, but then it has welcomed the talks between the two nations. Colonel Pillai.
India always believes in resolving its disputes, not only with its own neighbors on a bilateral basis. It is believed that dialogue is the best way forward, and it's also shown a lot of magnanimity in a lot of our own issues, in the manner which we have dealt with our conflicts. And the issue is the Western, particularly the Americans, like to talk. fire first and then talk later. And that's the same kind of a attitude that they have. India's position has always been, firstly, we are, affected greatly by whatever happens in the rest of the world. So the fact that India has abstained, it's also a lot of historical baggage to it. If you see, we've had a very bad run-in with the Americans when it came to support when a dictatorship was carrying out a genocide in East Pakistan. And we had the Russians to our rescue when we needed them the most, when the 7th Fleet had moved in. And similarly, the British, the NATO forces had actually moved on from the Gulf, from Oman and other areas. So you really can't, be seen as taking sides here. We've been abstaining and we don't have any reason to take sides either. But the fact is that between the two countries, if we need to take a side, I think it is the Russians who've been standing by us, even providing us when we were in the poorer days by ruble trades and others. And one more thing I want to add here, that sanctions have really not worked. And if you study the pattern of sanctions and what have they achieved, you've seen sanctions against Iran, you've seen sanctions against other countries. Now, a country like Russia is not going to buckle down to something like a sanction. It's not an idea or something that you're going to put them and then, you find them that they are strong. They may not be as strong as they want to be, but definitely they're not some tin pot dictatorship or a small economy floating around. It controls gas. It provides much of the gas requirements for Europe. Europe will shiver without Russian gas. And there are a lot of other things that Russia can inflict about. So I think the best way forward for the Americans is to show the maturity that they've been actually preaching to the rest of the world and trying to kind of get Russia, a country like Russia, show them the respect that they demand, and treat them with respect. If they've asked them that no NATO expansion towards its eastern borders, respect them for what they have been asking you for. You really can't push them to a limit. They're not. I think that is where the key and the restraint and this whole solution to the problem lie. And India's position has always been neutral in terms, and our belief has always been in bilateral dialogues rather than third-party interventions, because they've never worked. They never worked. You've not seen their interventions work in Iraq, Libya, where they have carried out regime change. It's never worked. So I think these things should be. They should look at India's examples of how we actually resolve our disputes, not only within our own territory, but with our neighbors.
Right. So we've discussed a whole range of issues and what could be the outcomes. Thank you so much, Colonel DPK Pillai and Major General Dhruv Katoch, for joining us in this conversation. And of course, it's the 5th day of the Russian invasion. The hostilities have, on both sides, actually, the casualties have risen. We keep our viewers updated with the latest. Foreign Secretary Shringla briefs the parliamentary panel on the Ukraine situation and the evacuation efforts. The catastrophe in Ukraine is perhaps one of the worst humanitarian crises. Ukraine says over 350 people have been killed so far. UN has said that over 5 lakh people have fled their own land. Here's a report on what's happening on the ground.
Since then, we withstood several onslaughts and assaults by Russian forces. We repelled them in several directions, and of course, they were also able to make some inroads. This is war, and the situation changes rather swiftly. So far, there's been a lull in the city, and at 8 a.m. this morning, curfew ended, so people went out to the streets to try to buy some food and water and stuff. I also went to the nearest supermarket, but when I saw that I would have to stand something like 3 hours in a queue, I came back because my radio station is broadcasting constantly, and I'm needed there more than in a supermarket.
So in a bid to flee to Europe or other parts of Ukraine, thousands of people are gathering at the railway station in Ukraine's Lviv. Let's listen in to some of the reactions.
situation with trains is a little bit critical because many people, and especially women, they will try to cross the border with children, and many people with their family try to go to the train, but it's not enough.
We saw online exist those trains that pass to Poland, because before I made this and maybe exist, but in fact no. We discovered that only will be for women and children if the train's coming, but they still sell some tickets online. It means I have my ticket here online, but in fact it's nothing. And now I'm trying to see the way to go to the Poland. And as she told, one of her friends that lives here in Lviv start to organize some bus for cross the border.
With that, we take a very short break here. News and updates continue. On the other side, we'll continue our focus on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.